Hello, good evening, and welcome to Henry Weston's Old Mate, the podcast. I am back. I've got a new guest with me, Mr. James Quigley over there. Before I get James to introduce himself, I'm going to hit you with the boring stuff. If you are watching this on YouTube, please like the video, share it amongst your friends. If you're listening over by Apple or Spotify, like, rate, review, give it all the reviews. Let's get this podcast out there. Good evening, Mr. James Quigley. How are you, sir?
Not too bad, Stuart. Pleasure to be here.
Good. It's a pleasure to have you on. So, James, we're old school friends, but I don't need to introduce you. We're not old school friends. We went to the same school. I don't need to introduce you. If you could just give us a quick introduction, name, where you come from, what you're doing at the minute, that would be great, mate.
Yeah, so my name is James Quigley. I was born in Scotland and then moved down to Dover when I was 3. And then I went to school up to secondary, and then university was in Rochester, then up to Glasgow, and I've been here ever since I think the year 2000. And since then I've been working in an architect's office / as an architect, and then in 2013 I went back to do a postgrad in cartography, and I'm now working for a local authority, surveying and looking after their assets, their property, etc. And in my spare time, I do a lot of running and cycling, and that's about it, really. So a quick run through of my life.
Well, hopefully we've got an hour, maybe potentially a bit more, but not too much to get through. But you touched on the running aspect there. That's kind of what we're going to go down to. I thought that potentially it's January, everyone's into the new year, new me. Let's get some exercise focus. And as we bumped into each other sort of towards the end of last year in the swimming pool, you looked in better shape than I did, let's be honest. And I thought, you'd be a great guest to come on. So for people who, how can I best explain it? You've just described your busy professional life. I know you're obviously a dad of one, and you've got your partner up there, a family man, full-time job. But it's a bit more than a little bit of running, if we're all honest, isn't it, mate? It's endurance stuff. It's elite level performing, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I wouldn't say I'm elite, but the stuff I'm now involved in, I suppose, is the longer distance endurance stuff. So stuff, I suppose, that maybe people would recognise some races. I've now moved on to more stuff in the Alps or just longer stuff in the UK. But it all kind of started, I suppose, in 2006 when I decided to do the London Marathon. And then I was just sitting at my desk after I'd done the London Marathon, and I was like, right, I need another challenge. And I then decided, what was that thing I watched on Transworld Sport when I was a kid? And I remember the marathon in the sand. So I looked it up, and then I thought, I'm going to do that. And so I basically signed up, and in 2008, I then flew over to Morocco and took part in the Marathon des Sables. So that was my first one, and it was quite big.
Yeah, you're probably going to be modest about everything, so I'm going to have to interject every now and again. The Marathon des Sables, described on its official website as the toughest foot race on earth. There's probably a few other foot races that want to call themselves that or would like to call themselves that. But if you Google or YouTube the Marathon des Sables, you have to be mad to do it. And you decided that was going to be your first real go. 6 days, 251 kilometers, which equates to about 156 miles. With the longest stage I found on the internet was in 2009, a 91-kilometer race through the sand dunes, all in a single day, all under, I assume, checkpoints, time points to protect yourselves.
Yeah.
From yourselves and the elements. Talk us through that first experience. You finished, I know that much, and I believe you finished rather well.
I did all right. So basically when I signed up for it, I didn't really have a clue about running. I did a bit of running at school, cross country, and then doing the London Marathon, I got injuries because I just kind of threw myself in the deep end. And then the Marathon des Sables was literally like buying all the gear, which was like a kind of eye-opener. And then even the person I was seeing at the time was a nurse, and I remember getting asked about electrolytes, and I didn't have a clue what they were on about, and it was a bit like, oh my God. And I think my partner at the time, poor her, she was just like, you're going to die out here. Anyway, I kind of managed to speak to the right people, prepare, and eventually we flew off to Morocco. I flew down to London, went down to my parents first, packed all my bags, and then we flew out. And yeah, as soon as we got there, even though I'd done some training in like saunas, etc., the heat was pretty intense, and it's very barren, but obviously beautiful. And yeah, so just there, and really enjoyed the whole experience. 6 days. So I'd maybe trained for the first 3, which kind of build up to like 40K. And then the 4th day's the 50 miler, which I was worried about carrying, because you've got to carry all your food, your ration to water. When you wake up in the morning and every checkpoint you get to, you're given water, and it's up to you how you use it. Some people use it to clean themselves. Some people just use it to hydrate. So I kind of had a good routine for my day. I was in a good tent with some expats that lived in Saudi Arabia, another Scottish guy, Graham, who I was in the tent with. And so we had quite a good bond, and you were kind of learning off each other. But I just stuck to my kind of plan, and I was lucky. I got away, no blisters, and everything went really kind of smoothly, really. And I kind of had a very enjoyable Marathon des Sables, whereas other people that were there weren't so lucky, lost the soles of their feet, due to blisters or heat exhaustion. But yeah, it was a great experience. And then when I came back home, I suppose that that interest just stayed with me. But the race itself, I wouldn't say it is the hardest. It's the most iconic race. Yeah, I think most people know it. And yeah, it's just one of those races that I'd say it'd be everyone should try, at least go and do it. It's not for everyone, but I've done it, and I'm very happy to have got it behind me. And it's a great experience. So I've got the medal. I think my mum's got the medal actually on her wall, funnily enough.
Right.
But yeah,
so,
it was just,
so you've gone off and you've run this iconic, as you just described it, race. You've survived. You've had you've had an enjoyable experience, which baffles me. And I just wanted we'll go on to talk about a couple of other races in a minute. But I listened to a podcast myself today when I went out and done my paltry 4 miles. I listened to the High Performance podcast, Jake Humphreys, and he had on Chrissy Wellington, a female triathlon athlete. I'd never heard of her, actually. She was 4 times world champion, and I can't really call it a quote, because it's just, it is a quote. I've taken it directly from the podcast, but she was describing how she first realized that she had a talent for endurance events. And she simply said, after she'd gone training one day, she said, I unlocked a physiological talent that would have otherwise laid dormant forever. And I'm just wondering if that's what's happened to you, in a sense. You said earlier that you were very athletic at school, and you did everything. So obviously you probably had an idea that you liked running, but at what point did you realize that you excelled at it? Because you do, in all honesty. So how many? Well, I'll ask that question in a bit. But when did the penny drop for you that, hang on a minute, I'm not, I'm a bit better than some of these other guys? Was that in local training, or did you get out to the Marathon des Sables and think, hang on, I'm quite good?
I think it's really hard to kind of compare myself against others, and I suppose I'm going to be a bit humble, but I don't really. I suppose it's really hard to explain, but I find it very hard to kind of compare myself. What I get from it is more than, I don't really care what position I come in, as long as I complete. Obviously the race and get into that's the kind of main focus. But I think I've got a lot of energy, and I think from leaving school, I went in the wrong direction, whereas I maybe should have stayed with sport and channeled my energy towards sport at that age, so I had
Okay.
a 10-year gap, and then when I was getting to my late 20s, I then was just bored. I mean, obviously with university, working, socializing, and then when I started running, I kind of realized that my training runs, I really enjoyed going off for the adventure. I really liked kind of maybe being on my own, whereas before, when I was kind of grown up, I didn't really like being on my own. And so putting the time in, I was willing to go out for a 20-mile run, or the weekend. Sometimes I've had a race coming up, go out for a 50-mile run, so be out for 15 hours plus, for a training run. I know that sounds pretty bonkers, but I kind of knew that that's what I'd have to do if I wanted to kind of enter these races. So it kind of hit me, I suppose, when I got into it. I either get into it and I want to carry on these endurance runs. Now I've been doing it for over 10 years. I know that this is the right thing for me, because I have the energy, I have the energy that I want to kind of use for a positive, rather than how I've used it before when it's not been so a positive experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is, we were just talking off air, and there is something you said to me. I'll refer back to it when we get later into the podcast, and about how you wanted to direct that energy. And I think that will make an excellent sort of point to finish the last 20 minutes of this podcast, hopefully. But if I just go back one step, you're out doing these training runs, and you just said it might go out for a 15-hour training run, but you want to get yourself in great shape. And I hope it's not a boring question, something that comes across everyone wants to know. I'm going to ask about the mental side as opposed to the physical side. Obviously, you're physically mega fit. What I know of you, I would describe you as a potentially single-minded character, or stubborn at times. I don't know you that well, James. We've only just sort of hooked up, really talking again in the last few weeks. But I don't want you to put a number on it, but how is it? Mind over matter? Is it for you? Is it all about training? If you put the training in, your muscles are strong enough, you'll finish. Or is there a certain degree of just stubbornness in the mind that you need? You must need to be able to just think, I know this hurts, but how do you put it? But maybe let's put a number on it. Is it 80% down to the body and 20% down to the brain for you? Or
I think it is. But I also think you have to be in the right place to go away and do these things. So, I mean, I pulled out of races because mentally I wasn't in a good place. So dropped out, and I've dropped out quite early in races, so, or maybe in some cases I've turned up to go to a race. It's only happened to me once actually, but I then didn't even make the start line. But I do believe that, the training, obviously you get into a condition, but it is mental, one, to continue to keep putting one foot in front of the other, but they both work in tandem, and I think you have to have the fitness, but at the same time mentally you have to be in the right place in the race. So, and then when it gets to, if you get to a certain level, which I suppose I am now, where that I can go out and do long distance runs, for me to continue I just have to want to do it, and as I said earlier, be in the right place at the right time mentally.
Yeah, and before I ask you, I want to get on to the UTMB and just get your thoughts on that, because it's sort of a part of the world I've spent a bit of my time, not running up and down, but sort of doing ski seasons and stuff. But it's just while it's fresh in my mind, you just said you turned up to one race and you didn't even make the start line. Can you briefly talk us through what happened there? You went into it undercooked, or you just got there and just thought, I'm not ready. The best thing to do is just to not do it.
Well, it wasn't actually. It was more, I went down with my partner and my son, and he wasn't settled, and he was not too happy, and so I just decided mentally to go out and do it. It was the Fellsman, which is about 62 miles. It's a horseshoe route in the Yorkshire Dales.
Okay.
And I've done it 2 times before that, and I went down, saw friends, had dinner, and then just through the night, my son Corin he just wasn't settled, and so I wake up in the morning and he still wasn't settled, and just mentally I thought I don't want to go and spend the whole day when I should be here with my son.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's not really a mental block that I had regarding the race, but I just didn't see. I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
Going off to do that. So.
And is that easier potentially, because I don't know. Obviously, you're not a professional athlete as such. You go to work Monday to Friday. So I don't know if you have any form of sponsorship or whatever, but had you been an athlete who had sponsorships to keep happy, sponsors to keep happy, appearance fees potentially, it might not have been quite so easy, but that would have been a dilemma in itself, because we, as parents, partners to others, I think our priority really in life is the health of everyone, isn't it? But
Yeah.
we don't. You might not have had the luxury of putting them first in such an incident.
No, I mean, but I have learned from that occasion and other occasions, and so my preparation before a race, I probably will be thinking about, right, what can I do to make sure that it's a smoothest run up to a race, whether that's doing stuff in the house, helping out, putting a bit of time in to make sure that when I leave, I'm not leaving my partner in a lurch.
Yeah.
And I've also chosen to maybe leave for a race early, so I'm a couple of days away before, and on my own as well. So depending on what race I'm doing, I might think, great, I need to be away, be there for a day or so, out of the way, and just get my head clear before taking on the race. And that I suppose that's now. My partner always says that I used to get quite stressed leading up to a race, and so I'm just gradually getting better at that as well. So it's managing my stress, and getting everything in place, so when I do leave, there's the household as a whole is a kind of calm place. So
I mean, that's great, because that's your, you have responsibilities to the race. You've put the training in. So you want to do that justice, but you obviously want to do those that you are leaving behind, be it for a day or a week.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting insight. So let's move on to the UTMB, the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc, over in France. Talk me through it, because you described the Marathon des Sables. So Marathon des Sables, we could say, is a stage race. You I don't know how much sleep, but you start the day and you finish the day. The UTMB is a single stage race. So how does that work? Do you start and then you don't stop till you cross the finish line, or is there the option to sleep? But if you sleep, then you don't win because people come past you. Talk me through it a bit, mate.
Single stage. So basically, you set off, and then the elite runners will do it in an incredible time, like just over 20 hours. I wasn't that fortunate to get around it that quickly, but when I first went to so basically when I came back from the Marathon des Sables, I was I just turned 31, and I felt quite invincible. So basically I started doing like more 50-mile races in Scotland, and I remember meeting someone, and I was like, "Oh, what are you up to next?" And he said, "I'm going out to do this route around Mont Blanc." So he told me, and I thought, I'm having some of that. So I basically registered in 2008 to do in 2009, thinking I've done the Marathon des Sables, I can do the UTMB, even though one's in the desert, one's in the mountains. So I kind of was doing a lot of training for, I was going up and down Monroe's up here in Scotland, and then we went out to Chamonix and literally got there, and it kind of blew my socks off about how big the mountains were. So the first attempt in 2009 wasn't successful. I got as far as Cormier, which is just under halfway.
Okay.
And I basically had to, tail to my legs, make the phone call saying, right, I'm coming back on a bus through the Mont Blanc tunnel. I've pulled out. And from that, I just, I realized then that, you have to do the proper training. Secondly, you have to be pretty focused to kind of take these things on. They're not small adventures or races. So, the UTMB, again, is a single stage race. You set off from Chamonix. It's normally about 6 o'clock on a Friday evening.
Yeah, it's late August or early September. I read that either the last weekend in August, or the first weekend in September. So you've still it's still pretty warm out there, isn't it? But you must potentially have some white stuff up at the high points by then.
Yeah, I mean, it varies. It was very cold the year I did it, and we dropped down and it got hot again. But I remember pulling out and thinking, right, I need to go and do the proper training and come back to it. So I went back in 2011 after doing what I thought was the proper training. And again, it was very cold. And I think I got around to Champagne in Switzerland, so 3/4 of the way around.
Yeah.
I mean, again, tiredness because the race was delayed by 2 hours. I hadn't slept on the Friday during the day, so I was kind of by the time I got to like Champagne on Sunday morning, early Sunday morning, I was pretty gone. Thankfully, my partner was there, Caroline, and she kind of took me in. And I remember the race organizer was trying to cut my band off. Because they were thinking like he's got hypothermia, and I was like, I'll be fine. I just need to kind of have a wee rest and warm up, and I'll be going. And sure enough, I was fine after about an hour, and then I got going again. But yeah, again, I took away from that race which I then completed in UTMB in 2011. That obviously, I don't think I got the training bang on for that, and so every single year that I've kind of like taken on a new race, I've learned exactly how I'd like to approach it again if I go back.
Yeah.
So that was my first experience of the Alps, and I got a taste for it, and I really enjoyed it. I loved the buzz, the atmosphere, the camaraderie was brilliant, and I suppose that kind of then took me away from the multi-day adventure thing that I did in the Marathon des Sables to I want to do more mountain races. So that's where I kind of. That from the UTMB, then that's where I thought, right, okay, I'll just stick with mountain races, and the kind of 100-mile-ish distance is what I like to do. So
for anyone who hasn't spent much time in the mountains, so the UTMB that James is telling us about, got some rough stats, about 170 kilometers, 106 miles, but the elevation gain in this event itself is actually basically 4,000 feet more than if you went to the top of Everest at about 29,000 feet. And they suggest on the internet that in the UTMB, there's 32,940 feet of elevation gain. So, I mean, I ski down these things and get tired, and you go out there and run up, which is amazing. But I've written these notes because that just allows me to lead into what I'm talking about, how much elevation you got there. Now, this spine race that runs through England that you've taken on again, James, so that has got even more elevation. That has got 43,000 feet of ascent in it. And that is even longer. That's 268 miles.
Yeah, the spine then runs that's in Great Britain. In actually just the winner of this year's race just finished yesterday, but I did that in 2015, and that was from Edale in the Peak District up to Kirkyeton in the Scottish borders. I can't remember how much ascent it's got, but the distance 268 miles through obviously beautiful countryside, but a lot of bog and a lot of and very, very cold. So again, but that was a single stage race. So rather than doing it in stages, you just set off, and it's up to you to manage your sleep as and when you want.
And you are, again, because there'll be people listening to this who will sort of be relying on me to hopefully fill in a few gaps here. So I'll ask what's going through my brain. How are you protected from yourself in such, I guess there's cut-off points. Is that the simplest way to put it? You have to make certain deadlines, and at these points, are you physically assessed as well before they let you out?
Yeah, I mean, there's a really good medical team. If we jump back to the Marathon des Sables, there was doctors at every checkpoint, and they checked your eyes to see if it's dilated, etc. And you had to listen to them. And obviously, if they told you to stop for a while, you had to. In the spine, for example, the medic team was very, very good. I ended up having a kind of knee issue, tendonitis in my knee, and actually a junior medic jumped up each checkpoint with me, and every time. I mean, I was just the fact that a lot of medical students come on board the spine race to basically learn, because obviously it's a great chance for them to come across things that, you know, like blisters and injuries to knees, and try and it's just a good experience for them. So so basically every time you get to a checkpoint, you check in, and if you've made the cut off, obviously you can continue on. I think the cut offs for the spine is quite generous, but it's a big slog, tough, wet, cold race, which I vow never to go back and do again. It was just pretty miserable for the majority. You only get 6 hours of daylight, so you want to kind of run during the daylight hours, and then obviously you want to get to a checkpoint at some point. But I think the first checkpoint at Hebden Bridge is like just over 40 miles. So you're self-sufficient for the first 40 miles.
Right.
And then after that, they do get a bit shorter between checkpoints, but due to the darkness, it does become, it's quite overwhelming. And again, now where I'm at, even though I'm 6 years after doing that race in 2015, I'm probably in a much better place. If I ever went back to it, I think the experience I've gained in the last 6 years is quite invaluable, really. Cool.
So before we move on to in a slightly different direction, so you must enjoy this because you keep coming back to it, but you just said with regards to the spine that you swore you'd never go back to that particular race. So the amount of training that goes into running these extreme distances, you cross the line and you're obviously exhausted. Is exhaustion, is that the first feeling? Is there a small amount of elation, or do you cross the line and as your first thought your partner and your child, or a mixture of everything? What goes, or does it change from event to event? Obviously, particularly at the spine, you might have just got past the line and think, get me home, get me a curry and a pint of lager, and let's forget about that one.
Yeah. They're all different. I did a race at Southern Uplands a couple of years ago, 2019, and that runs across the lower part of Scotland, which was 219 miles, and my partner and son weren't going to attend any of it because he was at nursery, and then they actually made it down for the finish, and I came in second, and I remember getting really emotional. And again, it's the emotional side, I think, just comes from being tired. I don't, when I'm not tired, I'm not that emotional at all, but then when I get really tired, I get very emotional. But I think, every race is different. Some races, at the end, I just can't stop talking. Other races, I just want to get home and move on. And then other races I finish and think, well, I'll never do that again. Day later, I'm going, maybe I could go back and improve my performance. So, every race you do come away, you learn a lot about yourself as well, because there's a lot of time especially in longer races, a lot of time on your own. And you've got a lot of time to think and process things. And, even though sometimes you get caught in a bit of a rut with thinking about stuff, I use it as a very kind of positive way of thinking about, I've got this coming up soon. How am I going to address that? Or how am I going to approach stuff? So I do use it. I can't say mindfulness, but I do use it in a weird way to kind of, think through things and process things. So there's a positive side to it as well for what I get out of it. But
cool. Let's go on to, we've just gone over about half an hour. I always say I don't know where the time goes, but there we go. So just before we came on, before we hit the record button, you said to me that you needed somewhere to focus the energy, and that's why the running started. You described that period of your life sort of between 20 and 30 where you'd done university and then you'd gone out to the working world, and basically you described how life was work and socializing, but you got to a point where I've been on a few, not necessarily nights out with you, but I remember bumping into you and Dan around sort of Deal a few times, and you're a little bit of an energizer bunny on a night out. That energy is there, but you said that at that sort of age, around 30 years old, that you needed something to focus it on, and that was the running. So potentially, were you concerned that energy needed some direction that wasn't the direction of partying after the working day had finished?
Yeah, I don't think I was concerned at the time, but I just think I had to find something new that would, hit the right button. And yeah, I mean, when I was at school, I was very into sport, and I kind of channeled my energy that way. And then when I left kind of school and went to art college, and that kind of went by the wayside. So I was playing a lot of golf, but then that was involved drinking in the clubhouse after, etc. And then after, as you're saying, when I was working as an architect up in Glasgow, I was just getting bored of the same thing over and over again. And I kind of suppose I had that fire in me that I still realized that, the excitement I got from playing football or whatever, or even just cycling around Glasgow. So I kind of, I don't know if it was just I got drawn back into it, but I kind of made a very conscious decision. I need to kind of channel whatever it is into something that I know that kind of calms me down. And that's, and again, for the last 10 years and where we are now, I know that when I go out for a run, whether it's a 2-mile run or, a longer run, for example, I get the same enjoyment, and it kind of gives me a sense of relaxation that I think I need, just to kind of bring me back down or bring me up to with dopamine levels or whatever back, so I can fit into normal society, if that makes sense, because I get very restless. So it's been difficult looking back, and the process that before doing this podcast, me thinking back, etc. It all kind of, I'm joining the dots, and where I am now, I wish I'd been at when I finished school, but unfortunately I went in the wrong direction, really.
Yeah, and I think we probably, a lot of us out there who could say the same. And it's hard, isn't it? Because you finish uni, you've probably been partying through uni, you go out to the working world, and you got a few more quid in your pocket because someone's giving you a wage.
Well,
and you yourself in Glasgow, a sort of busy, vibrant city, plenty of fun to be had if you wanted to. And yeah, those 10 years, you probably don't look back on them with regret, but potentially, like you say, had you sort of focused your time running or cycling, do you think could there have been a chance of taking it a bit more seriously? You obviously take it very seriously, but not professionally seriously as such. Would you have been good enough at 22, 23, or would you have been strong enough?
Mentally, probably not strong enough, but maybe physically I could have done. I think, where I am now, I'm mentally much stronger as a runner to go off and do these adventures than I was back then. But I do think that back then, maybe even the military or something might have suited me, to go and to kind of grow up very quickly. And I think I kind of needed that kind of kick up the backside, and so who knows, but I do think that I might have had a bit more potential in sport at that age, because I quite liked I liked even the kind of training sessions that we had I played for Dover from about under 9s to the youth team, and the training sessions were just let's go and run, and I was always at the front, kind of, because I liked running, so like running up the cliffs. So I don't know, there could have been, I suppose if I'd got the right coach or whatever else, or if I landed in the right spot with the right people around me, I could have maybe done a bit more with my running, so
yeah. And I suppose it wasn't. Was it on trend back then? I mean, I don't know if it's
not
trendy
really
now, but there's I guess with everything, the internet. I mean, if I went out and had a run and really enjoyed it, I could hop home and hop onto YouTube, and I can see Kylian Jornet going up a mountain and then skiing back down the bloody thing at a rate of knots, or I've got access to the stuff that you probably didn't have back then, or we didn't have back then. I mean, we got match of the day on the telly, and you mentioned Trans World Sport earlier, which was actually a fantastic TV series. But I remember, I think that's where I first ever saw the sort of Pakistani Indian game of kabaddi, which then, sorry,
is that when they hit each other?
Yeah, well, they hold hands, don't they? And you don't breathe. Well, when you leave the ring, you have to chant kabaddi to make sure you're not having an intake of everything. But anyway, but then I realised that you could actually watch kabaddi on Channel 4 for half an hour a week. This has gone completely off on a tangent. But yeah, Trans World Sport and a bit of football and the cricket was about all we were exposed to back then in the sort of 90s to 2000. But yeah, you can get into anything via YouTube if you want to nowadays.
Yeah, but I think I was very lucky with very supportive parents, and they kind of pushed me in certain areas. But yeah, I mean, our school was very focused on, well, the only real sport I suppose was football. You had cricket, obviously, which I think every year played, and tennis, really. You know, there's no rugby, which I don't think I ever really got into. But you know, again, yeah, we only had access to the sports around us, and so if you haven't got mountains, you're not going to have, you know, people going into the mountains running. But you know, I think, you know, now, which I try and do with my son, is just try and introduce him to as many sports as possible. But you know, hindsight, whatever, I'd love to have got into it at a much younger age, but it just wasn't the case. So you know, now I don't know, from me, I was just very fortunate that, you know, I had that moment when I was working, just I want to go and do something a bit different, and the Marathon des Sables popped into my head, and from then I've just jumped, you know, and sometimes I've taken on races that are, you know, that are just too big for me, and then obviously I've gone back to, you know, try and complete them after doing the right running. But I've just tried to move up, and I go back and do shorter races, etc. But I just try, in the last few years, I've been trying to move up, obviously besides COVID years, into different races. But every year I've moved up, I've gained more experience, etc. So I feel quite comfortable now. I mean, there's still a few races that I haven't done, but I do feel quite comfortable. The kind of level of fitness I've built up and my knowledge of being in the mountains, etc. Right now. So
let's talk about, you described how you enjoy the solitude earlier, very early in the podcast. You mentioned you enjoy the solitude of being out on a run now, that you didn't enjoy being on your own when you were younger. But a lot of my other podcasts, you know, not necessarily the alcohol recovery angle, but a lot of when me and Phil chat, we talk about mental health. And if you could just sort of, from your own perspective, I assume you use your running in a sense to manage your mental well-being, like a lot of people manage exercise or use exercise, I should say, to manage their mental health. Yours goes beyond that, because it is more, I don't want to describe it as a hobby, because it's far more than that. But you have a reason beyond your mental health to do the training you do. You know, you've got these phenomenal races you compete in. But is that still quite an important aspect for you? You know, I know I'll go out and run, sort of try and run 20 miles a week if I can. And if I don't run, if I'm injured, then I can get my head around that. But if I don't run when I know I should be, that has an adverse effect on me. Are you similar? Because you must be putting in some mega miles a week. But when you don't go out and train because you're feeling a bit lazy, we all have that. Does that play on the mind?
Yeah, I mean, I get very grouchy. And I think in the house, especially both of us, you know, Caroline and myself, we both realised that we need that time away from our son, you know, just to go and get some headspace, get to the gym, go swimming, or go out for a run or a cycle, just to kind of, you know, reset the buttons and then just come back and, you know, get back into family life. But yeah, I mean, I think it's taken quite a few years, but Caroline realizes how important it is now for me to get out, even if it's for 20 minutes or so, just to get out, come back in, and I'm reset. So yeah, it is very important. And people that I know who aren't runners or swimmers or whatever, and have said to me before, well, what do you get out of it? It's like, well, unless you try it, you'll never know. But it's definitely for me a means of sorting my mental health out, and just processing stuff and bring me back down so I can actually deal with the reality of life.
Because life isn't a box of chocolates, as Forrest Gump once said. Sadly, I know from obviously my mental health suffered terribly through my alcoholism. That's fortunately in the past. Well, not in the past, but the drinking part of it is in the past. And while the initial period of sobriety, I couldn't have got out and done much, but even in the early stages, I remember just going out and raking a pile of leaves in my garden once, but thought I was going to die. But I came back in and I had that the chemistry, whether it's the dopamine or whatever. But I came back and I had that good feeling from being physically active. And I think it's something that I really want to try and push. And anyone who's listening to this, if you are a regular listener and you're thinking, you'd like to get into something. I know my mum in the last, she's always been fairly active. She's not an athlete. She doesn't run, she doesn't cycle, but she's always liked to walk. But she got into walking, and she's probably doing 4 or 5 miles 4 or 5 times a week.
Brilliant.
She's had some brilliant benefits. My dad's not very well, and he's been retired for a while now. So they live in a reasonably small house together, 24 hours a day. None of the 3 boys are there anymore to make things even more tense. But she's, I speak with her a lot, and the benefits of just being able to get out and clear her head, and be honest, have some time away from my dad. And we all know we love our partners, we love our children, we love our parents, but we don't, or spending all day with them isn't any good for any of us. So yeah, the mental health side. So I mean, we've covered a lot of stuff that we've run through. We're at about 42 minutes, James.
Can I just say something? It's quite interesting because I'm basically a very family member that I have discussions with regarding this. Is my sister always says, "Oh, I'm going to go out for a walk," and she normally goes to the shops, and I always try and keep saying to her, "Get out and just walk freely. Don't have anything, don't have a goal, whatever." And she's gradually coming around to it, and hopefully she will stick at it. But I mean, when I go running or just going out for a walk on my own, it's amazing actually small things you'll pick up, and they'll just make your day. Whether it's just if you see a child playing, or if you see an old lady and she says hello, just small things or little small details, cracks or whatever, in the floor or whatever, they can bring back childhood memories, which I think, can only be a positive thing as long as they're a positive memory. But I cherish those kind of moments. And my dad died in 2019 and I must have gone for about 4 walks a day just to kind of get out. Just to, and it was only up and down the Dover Promenade. So you're talking not even 2 miles, but just out, back in, and then would readdress what we had to do to, sort out funeral arrangements. But without that, I suppose going back about 10 years ago, I'd have probably found myself maybe having a drink or whatever. Whereas this time, I've literally, it was walking 3-4 times a day just to kind of make sure that I was getting my head in the right place to go back and help my mum out, really. So yeah, it's invaluable, really, for me anyway. And anyone that hasn't tried it, just give it a try.
I mean, that is fantastic and fantastic advice. And for anyone, I've talked about AA a lot in podcasts, and AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, one day at a time. Anyone who, you'll see the sort of ODAT sort of trending on Twitter or hashtag on Twitter, and it just simply stands for one day at a time. But you'll find people like you've just described a day, in sort of a very traumatic period in your life. Your father had passed, but you've just sort of very brilliantly described a coping mechanism, 4 walks a day, but to get out and, like you say, adjust your mental headspace, get some fresh air through the lungs, not sat down on the sofa contemplating, if you're an addict, to drink, but in your, when you were dealing with your father passing, that could have been a 2-hour period of feeling sorry for yourself, potentially other people in the house going through the same pain as you, that could have led to potentially maybe some unpleasant arguments because you were all a bit stressed. But you've got out, and that would be advice in itself if you're dealing with anything negative, be it a bereavement or an addiction, or, you know, I've been writing about it a lot recently. I'm using too much social media. I'm not sat commenting on Twitter all day. I very rarely comment on anything, but I'm sat watching it. And that's why I make sure I'm getting out running 5 times a week at the minute, because I know that's doing me good. It's getting me away from the bloody iPad. But yeah, that's just fantastic. I mean, I couldn't push that enough, really, that how exercise, we should all try and fit it into our lives. If we've got time, I know it's dark this time of year in England, but when the summer rolls around, if you've got time to binge watch a series on Netflix, you've got time to exercise for 45 minutes.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And it'll be much more worthwhile doing that.
Yeah. So I don't want to say we've come to the end, James, because we haven't quite. You're a bit older than me. I'm nearly 42. We won't go into, you're a couple of years older than me, let's say that. But you're still, you know, you've got races booked up this year, you told me about. So you are, when does an athlete in this sort of genre of sport, athleticism, when do they peak? Can you guys go on forever if you look after your feet and look after your nutrition? Do you just keep going?
I think your peak's about 30. And then after that, I suppose you just have to look after yourself. There's a lot of runners that have come into the scene, especially American runners who went through college, were really, really good runners, and they just overtrained and kind of blown up. So I've had my injuries. I've been very fortunate. I've kind of got over them, but they maybe other things creep up. Like last year, I had a calf injury and then a lower back injury. But again, I suppose with my patience and knowledge that I have now, and not 10 years ago, I managed to kind of take a step back and heal in time for the races that I had last year. But yeah, I think it's just as long as your body holds out. But if my plan is that if I did get to a stage where running wasn't doable, then I might move into another sport, maybe swimming or whatever, but another event that's maybe a bit endurance led. So, or, you know, cycling, but just, yeah, it just depends on the individual and how your body holds up. But it is, I wouldn't say it's the kindest thing to your body. I mean, you do feel pretty battered at the end of it. Whether it's a 50-mile race, well, anything over a marathon, you feel battered at the end of it. The longer races, I mean, the spine, I think I was 3 months it took me to fully recover. So I didn't really run at all for 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was January, and it wasn't until I missed a couple of races that I thought I would be able to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, that took it out of me a lot.
And that's, sorry to interrupt, but that's physical. I mean, you felt physically tired from an event for 3 months.
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
And little, you know, kind of aches and pains hadn't cleared up, so it did take me a considerable time before I could then run again. I mean, and feel that I had the energy. I was just fatigued for that length of time, really, and then obviously I did feel my strength coming back.
And what happens in that period? You've just said you feel your strength coming back, because I know, again, I don't want to, my small amount of running that I do, but if I, for example, if I had 3 or 4 days off running and was potentially overindulging with what I eat, I would feel heavy and sluggish, and my mental state would suffer. But what happens to you in that sort of period of 3 months when you put your body through so much that you're just at that point where you can't run? Do you go through the same feelings, or does your body, because you've put it through so much, are you able to eat a bit more without that feeling of I should be exercising? Because that's what I do. I exercise. I've eaten a Big Mac meal and I've had pizza for dinner. I'm sitting on the sofa. I should run tomorrow. Or does it just not cross your brain in those initial periods?
I mean, after a race, I just eat what I want. And I quite enjoy it because I love eating. But then after a while, I will start to feel a bit sluggish, and I think, right, okay, I need to kind of rein it in a wee bit here and, stop. And if I can't, but due to injury, then obviously I try my best to try and be as healthy as I can. So when I do get back into training, I'm at a better place starting, rather than being, a bit overweight and not in best of health, really. So so after the race, I just do what I want until I start feeling right. I need to kind of start reining in because I want to start training in a week's time, for example. So
right.
Or I'd maybe just, after, even going to the sauna and things like that to kind of loosen up the muscles, etc. Or doing light swimming, for example. So, there's things that you can put in its place just to keep your body ticking over.
There's one point that I've missed, and I've just caught it. So I wanted to. You've touched on it on a few times as we've been chatting, but so now that you're a dad, and what you train for these events, you have to put a lot of training in. I just wanted to ask you about the balance of, that you've obviously got work, and then you've got family, but you've also got training for a potentially, if we go back to the spine, a 250-mile event. So that's not 5 hours of training a week, is it?
No.
How have you balanced that, and have you got better at balancing the training, work, family life, that balance, that work-life balance we talk about? Yours has got the added dimension of basically professional athlete in his spare time, which is might not make sense, but that's really what it is. How do you, or did you struggle at first, when the little one came along, but I still need to get 50 miles in this week, but I've got a newborn baby, and my wife, who's been carrying the baby for 9 months, is knackered, but I need to go and do 10 miles, and it's 8 in the evening. Yeah. How did you cope, and have you got better?
Yeah, well, I think when I started this whole process off in 2008, I had then 7 years before my son came along in 2015. So by the time I got to 2015, I think I built up my fitness that when it came to the spine, the 7 years of training had got me to the point that I could do that length of distance.
Yeah.
And then after then, I'd kind of just maintained my level of fitness. And obviously when it comes to like specific races, whether it's mountain or it's flattish, so I'd look at my training specifically for that terrain. I think I have, since having a child, I do not do the same distances I would have done pre-child.
Yeah.
Just because, some days I'm out running and I think, I was going to go out for a 3 hour run, for example. And then after an hour, I'm like, well, no, he's at home. I'd like to, put him to bed tonight. So I'd come home early. But there's other times that I try and fit it in. So I think, was it on Tuesday just gone? Yeah. So he was going back to school on Wednesday after the Christmas break, or 2 Wednesdays ago. But I just, he was off for a play date. So I just jumped in the car and went up and did some Monroes. And then I was back in time for dinner time. So I try and fit it in around his schedule as well. I used to run to work, which was really good because it was like 8 miles there, 8 miles back.
Yeah.
So I incorporated it into my daily routine. So it didn't really have too much of an impact. But if I've got a race coming up, I'll try and arrange it with Caroline that, these are the days that I'll go away and we'll make it work that way. And then obviously she'll have a day off, and I'll be looking after my son. So yeah, it's just a kind of, I suppose, you just have to kind of get a routine that works. But I try to go away as much as possible just for the sake of training.
That's what you just said. I mean, I do it because I'm fortunate that I work 7.5 miles away. So I'll in the summer I'll run home once a week. But it's fantastic, and this isn't an advice podcast. But if you are struggling to fit a bit of exercise in, if you do work 3, 4, 8 miles, it's not actually, you don't actually need to be that physically fit to get on your bike and cycle that. So that's another good one.
You also feel revitalized when you get there, even though you might be getting there, leaving at 7 in the morning, getting there for 8. You feel fantastic, and it's a great way to start your day, by getting endorphins going at that time in the morning.
It is, yeah. I always feel $1 million when I get to work on my bike, and then when I get home, because Kingsdown to Sandwich is always tailwind, and then Sandwich to Kingsdown is normally headwind. But you just said about you go away for some of your training. I want to finish, if you can remember the story. Do you remember the time you took our mutual friend Dan Oliver to Snowdown, and he turned up and he described to me that you told him off because he wasn't particularly prepared? Do you remember that?
Well, we were actually all on a family holiday in Wales, but yeah, he did. I did say we'll go and do a hill tomorrow, because this was maybe about a year or so before he was going to do Mont Blanc.
Yeah, Dan. For anyone who'll know, Dan's been on and told us about Mont Blanc. He didn't tell us about turning up for Snowdon with not much more than a £5 regatta Pack-a-Mac, was it?
Well, he had better gear than that, but he did turn up a bit skimpily dressed. But in fairness, he's done me a favour, because he didn't tell the whole story. But it was funny, because I did say to him, right, we're going to a mountain tomorrow, and he was saying, well, where are we going to go? And we were in the kind of middle of Wales, and I made him drive all the way to Snowdon, which was about a 2-hour drive. And then we got to Penny Pass, which is you don't have to do too much ascent to get up Snowdon. And I said, right, we'll go up this way, and then we'll go over the top, and we'll come back on quite a simple trail. But yeah, he turned up in the morning, and he was just wearing kind of shorts and a t-shirt. And I was kind of saying, no, we're going to the mountains. You need to kind of get a bit more gear on. And thankfully he did, because we turned up and off we set, and it was a bit of cloud in, and we went up the kind of south side from Penny Pass, and I'd kind of forgotten about how technical it was. And, I'm, I suppose, used to it. He wasn't so. As we were ascending up, the weather turned, and it's the first time that it was actually raining upwards. I mean, the wind was constantly howling, and everything, all the rain was going up our clothes, etc. And the idea was to carry on and do more technical stuff. But thankfully, I said, right, we'll just go up, we'll get to the top of Snowdon, and we'll come back down. And the weather was just deteriorating as we're going up. And then in my excitement, when we got to what I thought was the top, I started descending. And so we must have descended for about a good half an hour. And then it dawned on me that we were going down to Nantgwent, I think it's called, and away from the summit. So I then had to explain to Daniel, we've now got to redo that ascent and then head to the top. And his face was a picture. But, I mean, at one point, I think he was complaining that his eyes were freezing. And I did feel very sorry for him, but I didn't really know what to do in that position. But he was a soldier, and he got to the top, and then we made it down, and we've got the pictures to prove it. But it was a bit of an experience. And then he had to drive 2 hours back to the house. And so I think he was very happy to get home in one piece. But I just say it was, I wouldn't say it's character building, but it put me in good stead for going to the Alps anyway. So
yeah, I mean, he
did brilliantly.
He did, and that was a fantastic podcast. Anyone who's not sure what we're talking about, if you head over to the podcast library, it's one of the earlier ones there. But Dan was a fantastic guest. James, you've been a fantastic guest. We're pretty much approaching the 1 hour. So I think we'll call it a day there. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I found it, like I always say, these podcasts are wonderful for me. They indulge my sort of passion for learning about things, asking the questions that, you know, I'd like to ask. But you've been amazing. Anyone listening to this got any questions, just fire them over to me at Henry Weston's old mate, so HWOM the pod at gmail.com. I will, you know, I will try and answer them, or I will pass them on to James.
Please do.
If you're a budding ultra endurance runner, good luck to you. But James, thank you so much. I'm going to hit stop recording, but I won't cut you off, mate. Thanks for joining us. It's been really good fun.
Cheers, Jim.
And